first while John was at or right after he was at Patmos. I would uh, say that he wrote it while he was there. I don't see him waiting after he's told to write. I think it was written during that whole period while it was going on, um, and then sent to the churches. Then after Patmos, he goes back to Ephesus. Um, and in Ephesus, this Gnostic ideas are taking place. This is really a continuation and an evolving of the philosophies of the Greek uh, uh, philosophers of how things are, and the idea that matter uh, is evil and that spiritual is good, and that it didn't matter. And uh, so John is fighting it initially, and you see the letters of John being written to his congregation, and so we don't know if well, he's got them spread out. So he's sending letters because he's an old man at this point. I mean, he's in his 90s, so traveling is not easy for him. We don't jump in a car and go. Uh, he might get on a donkey, but that might be more difficult than walking. Um, so he resorts to writing. He doesn't like to write. You can tell that by reading his letter. I prefer talking to you face to face, is what he says. And so the cover letter for the epistles, I believe the second letter is the cover letter for the first letter. And that the third letter, the third epistle, is a addendum added to it, to the one place where he wants to make sure that they got a place for him to stay, and where he has to go personally and take care of the problem that's there. Uh, so that's the way we should understand these letters when we start to look at them. It's John, now that he's come back, or he is coming back onto the scene as the elder, the last of the living apostles, uh, to be a ruling elder, if you would, a ruling apostle, uh, to see that the church goes the right direction, and sees this Gnosticism all over the place and how it's starting to affect the church. And so he's addressing that when he addresses his letters to the church. And it's with that background that we should understand that. Um, the gospel is written after these letters are written, and the gospels are trying to make crystal clear what Christ did and what he taught. So the Gospel of John is the most theological of the Gospels. He is the theologian of the church in that respect. Paul, in his writings, as Peter said, might be difficult to understand because he's so detailed. All right, and he's showing how it's not just a Jewish religion, but that it is for all nations. All right, and so he has to unpack what other the Jewish Christian with the history of the Old Testament and the knowledge of it is bringing to the forefront. One of the things we should remember when we're working with the text is that the early Christians only had the writings that the apostles had put out for them for their New Testament, which was mostly epistles and the Gospels as they were written. But the Gospels were being written, a history of what Jesus said and did was being written, and it was being written as part of the evangelism effort that was taking place. Those motives don't go away. And that those same motives are used against the church by the higher critic, saying, "Well, this can't be true. This is myth. This is making it more than what it was. It's this embellishment." And I said, you can't read the text and understand that and say that's embellishment. And the way they make it embellishment is they try to make it older and older, so that it is not written at the time when the apostles actually were there, but were written by somebody else, by the Johannine school of thought. So it's written like John would write it, but it wasn't really John who wrote it. Well, all of this is criticism. Higher criticism would push this out in their, this is Bultmann and the like, in their demythologizing the scriptures. Tischendorf, one of his great claims to fame is that he was not only a great biblical scholar, but that he set out to find the oldest texts because of what was going on by these higher critics. And when he found the Sinai text, the Sinaiticus, that was the great find, because he found parts of the Bible that we didn't have other copies of other than in the Latin, or in they didn't have it in total, or they just didn't have it. But the Sinaiticus, this text that they found, later they found also in the Vatican, the Vaticanus. You say, how can that be? Well, it was kind of like the warehouse that we talked about, where they put the Ark of the Covenant in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's kind of the Vatican archives. Anyhow, in finding Sinaiticus, see, the Vatican, Vaticanus does not have the Book of Revelation in it. It's damaged in that section and the like. And nobody had a copy of Barnabas, which is not the canonical book, but it is a book of that time, and it does witness to the authenticity of the authors, author by John especially. So when he found Sinaiticus, he then turned around and wrote well, first he tried to get the book to us. It took him 3 trips to Sinai and a lot of political intrigue, basically, to get what was available. When he went to Sinai the first time, he found what I'm talking about being tore up to throw into the fire. It was in the waste camp. And he found, and they told him he could have those, but when he wanted the rest of the stuff, well, they realized from his excitement that this must be important. And then, so they said no. And so he came back 2 years later, tried it again, and he ended up not finding it until, I think he found it at the end, when he was having a time with one of the librarians. They were just talking, and he took it down and said, yeah, I've got He says, I've been reading the book like that. And then he took it down. It was wrapped up in a red cloth, and he saw it. And there was a whole bunch of intrigue. And the Tsar of Russia is pulled in to this also. And they end up making it a present to the Tsar of Russia. But not all the pages are there. But today it's in 4 different places. There's some pages still in Russia, St. Petersburg. I think I don't have to go up and get the book. The Sinai has like 10 or 12 pages. The Brits bought it from the communists for 100,000 pounds, and that it was some other pages were found also. That's but all of those are put together now by electronic an effort to bring all of this together so that scholars could study it. And Tischendorf got a copy of what he could of everything. So getting that book, he ended up being able to prove that this writing at 400 and 300 BC had nothing to do with the truth. And so it pushed it back. And then the papyri, which were added on to that, that they found here recently and the like, that's mostly the new stuff now is the papyri. That all pushes it back into the 2nd century. And right at the beginning of the 2nd century, as it goes at least back to that. So it's taking away this whole idea that it was the communities that developed the scriptures. It wasn't the communities that developed the scriptures. It was the scriptures developed the community. And it puts this back on realizing when we're reading the scriptures that we're looking at fact, we're looking at a historical fact, history taking place where God is entering into our own history here, human history, to guide it, and that he hasn't taken his hand off of humanity. And that the salvation is a very personal thing between us and him. That what he has revealed is true. So I'm saying that because the messages that we get from these texts tell us what our God desires, and that he is. And though we might get tired of waiting, if you would, he really is there for us. Now, I have to pull up, I have to pull up the what you have before your. So we're dealing at a time when Gnosticism is starting to take hold. They've taken the scriptures and they've tried to make them into license to do whatever you want, from sexual freedom to anything and everything goes. God likes to forgive sin, and man likes to sin, so we've got really a good deal going. That's not true at all. And the problem with that, of course, is that it creates a situation where we end up not believing what actually has been said. Everything today, if you look at the latest out there, it's all about what we can do. Um, it's very man-centered, and so yeah, it can't be more important than ever for us to understand that what God has said, He means, and that we don't have that we actually have a God to answer to, that we are His creation, and He wants a relationship with us, but we can't be in sin, and that's why He had to send Christ. But those who deny that Christ even exists, they don't look to Him as Savior, they're lost. There's only one. Christ Himself declares that to you, and He is the truth. Now, let's see if I can get this. All right, let's see. There we go. Okay. So, on the top of the text that I or the epistles I sent you of John, you have a digital um, web page that you can put in, and you can go on that web page. Will take you to the Sinaiticus project, and you can click on that and go to the text and see the exact text. You can see it in the Greek capitals, and then they also have it translated for you in the smaller uh, unicles, also the small text. So now I've only given it to you in the large text in the Greek, and I would only point out to you a couple of things. The omegas that are in the Greek text look like an omega. That is a letter that was developed later on in time. It looked like the W before that. So the small text W is what the large text W looks like, but there's not a way to do that and be able to flip text back and forth. And there is no sigma, that's S. Greek now has a sigma at the end with a long tail, an S with a long tail at the end of words. And it has what looks like a circle with a line on top, which is that's in the line itself. Now, back at the time of these capital letters, when they were being used, there was no such thing. They were large. They looked like if you would, they are marked as a large C. The problem with working those texts is that the large C, the E, let's see, the O, and the theta, they look the same. So you have to really struggle to get what that is. And so when you try to match up text to try to see what's there, and that's only important in figuring out, well, it is important in figuring out the endings and the like of the words, because everything is case sensitive. That means it tells you what part of speech that word is. And for the verbs, it not only gives you tense, person, number, and mood. So that's why above your word that's being translated. I have perfect, for an example, your first line, it says perfect, active, indicative, first person plural. Well, first person plural is a we, right? Uh, it's active, it's not passive, so it's the thing doing. It's not being done to it. Passive is being done to. It's active in the perfect. Perfect meaning that it has happened in the past. So have happened. Imperfect is a continuing, happened in the past, but continues. We normally use the word was in there. And if it just ended in ed, then that's not perfect, but that's past tense. Perfect is completed past tense. The other is just simple past tense. And then you have pluperfect, which is having had happened. Okay, so you find that in the scriptures, having been written, for an example. All right, but the verbs are the key to the text itself. And so if you notice underneath the abbreviations I have in parentheses, there's one little word. That's the root word. That's the first person singular. That's the word you look up. All right, but if you don't know that word, if you can't unpack that from out of there, then you have a problem finding out what it means. That's why that's written the way it is. All right. So a person who doesn't know Greek can still translate what it means in English as far as the way the verb is supposed to be read if they know the abbreviations above. And so I've done a little introduction for that I can send out to you on that. But that's why it's there. All right. That's to tell you it's coming from the text. Now, as you look at the text, you'll find a color coding in it also. The color coding has to do with the different texts that have been issued as we found the document. So you got Textus Receptus, which is the one that Martin Luther used, okay, basically. That's back, Erasmus is the guy that did it, and he did it with three or four texts. I think it was 5 texts that he had that belonged really to somebody else. And he used them to put them together to make a Greek New Testament for everybody back at Luther's time. All right. Well, he used the least accurate of the text and he translated back into it, but that's the text they got. And from that all the way through the King James has been a correcting of that. And even today, the New King James, the ESV and the like, is a correcting of that text. And we call that the Nestle Allen text mostly, or the biblical science text. So those texts that we're looking at, I show the evolution of those texts so that you can see if there has been or hasn't been any real change in the meaning. And it boils down to, you might change the text tense in the verb, but the meaning that's being presented really doesn't change. A lot of effort is made over things that mean nothing, like the floating N, the new, it's called hiatus. And you might see the word hiatus as you go through the text over the top, where the N is put in, initially was put in between the vowels so that you wouldn't, tongue tangle. It was to prevent that. So there would be an N that would put on the end of the verb if it was going into another word that had started out with a vowel. Well, that stayed for a while, but then all of a sudden you start looking at it and you say, I don't understand what's going on here, because the word starting with a consonant, you still stuck an N on it. So uh, it's just a floater, and it means nothing, but it's a correction to the old text, trying to get back to the original text. So that when you start talking about thousands of errors in the Bible, uh, they don't mean anything in most cases. Now, what else? You'll see if you're going through my text that I may have marked something where the text changes. And this is the big thing that I want you to understand. The changes were the language, not the text. If you look at the first line, uh, you get the word Arakoman. We have seen. Um, you notice that the omega on the capital Greeks, I have a little note underneath. The O was changed to the Omicron was, or O was changed to an omega. All right. That's because of the way people talked. Their way of speaking as it changed, that was a working book. That's a Vaticanus that you're looking at there. That text was a text that was being spoken. All right. And as people spoke, this is being read in church. All right. Instead of reading like the old King James English, changed to the new King James English. They didn't change the meaning, they just simply pronounced the word differently. And there's many of the changes in the text are exactly that. So I say you can have a lot of confidence in the text itself. There are some variants, we call variants, where the text reads a little differently, where a note was brought in, or where you might see some liturgical statement made instead of what should have happened. Well, okay, let's not let this all go for nothing. Let's get this at least the first line done. The one having the one he was from beginning, the one we have heard, the one we have seen with the eyes of us, the one we ourselves observed, and the hands of us they touched, concerning the word of life, or of the life, okay? And the life she made known, and the one we have seen, and we are testifying, and we are informing, that is proclaiming, to you all the life, the eternal, which she was to the Father, or with the Father, and she was made known to us. Okay? So John is testifying already at the very beginning about this word, the one we have seen and we have heard, we are informing also you all, so that also you all fellowship you might have with us. And the fellowship, okay, just a minute. But the fellowship, the one ours, is with the Father and with the Son of him, Jesus the Christ. And I select Christ as Messiah in Hebrew, and Christ in the Old Testament. So in the first three verses, you have John describing that what he's speaking and proclaiming is what he's been an eyewitness to. That this is not something he's making up. That this is something that, he's touched, he's lived with, he's seen. And that's who he's with, the Son of him, Jesus, the Christ. Uh, you know, I don't think you can get much clearer than that as far as the fact that what we're hearing in Scripture is an eyewitness account of Christ's life here on earth, his saving work for us, and who he is. Now, this is John in his late years. And these things we write to you all so that the joy of us, she having been fulfilled, and she is this, the message, the one we have heard from him, and we are informing you all that the God, he is light, and darkness not, it is in him none. Okay, so there's even no evil, no darkness, nothing. He has no evil intent for any of you. So this idea of predestined to heaven and predestined to hell doesn't stand at all. There is no darkness in him. The scriptures tell us that he would have all men be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. He created man so man could tell him yes or no. He created man very, with a lot of power. I think our time is up here, but we'll pick this up next time.